Okay, hello to those of you who have joined this late afternoon, early evening. We will have an abbreviated class tonight, and but nonetheless, we'll make it interesting. Here's where we were last week. Last week we were analyzing the first stanza of Lecha Dodi, and in our analysis, we explored the concept of Shamor, Zachor v'Shamor b'dibur echad nemru, that the idea, the command of Zachor at Yom HaShabbat and Shamor at Yom HaShabbat were stated at the same time. The idea of remembering, recalling, mentioning the Shabbat and also observing it, guarding it, were mentioned at the same time. And so, as I said, as an aside, that drasha, that expounding of the sages, that Zachor and Shamor were stated together, is the basis for the idea that women are obligated in the Friday night Kiddush on a biblical level, just like men, even though it is a positive time-bound commandment. That strong connection of Zachor and Shamor, the positive and the negative mitzvot of Shabbat, are connected. As a side point, we mentioned last week. So what I want to do is think we'll do a little review and going through the first stanza, and hopefully we'll see the second stanza as well today. But I want to just add some more color to the first stanza. How do the last two lines of the stanza come together in this whole picture? So I think I just shared the screen, but now I just need to move some windows out of the way so I can see you. There we go. Let's expand that. Okay, so you see here the Lecha Dodi, and you have in between the Lecha Dodi, you have each stanza. So Shamor v'Zachor b'dibur echad, the idea of remembering and of observing the Shabbat were said in one utterance. Hishmiyanu, and there was Keil HaMiyuchad, God, the unique one, God caused us to hear this. And so that we spoke about last week, that there's something that God caused us to hear. It's not so easy to hear two things, much harder to say two things at the same time, but also probably hard because it's a cacophony of sounds. How do you hear these two things? But God caused us to hear it. And so that is the first part of the first stanza. And 1 second, the chat here. Can a woman be motzi a man with kiddush? Alan asked in the chat box. The answer is yes, 100%. There's some discussion in some of the achronim about that question. That's brought up. I would say without the doubt, though, certainly within a family, there's no reason that would not be permissible. Some of the achronim, though, have an issue with it when it comes to maybe mixing together others because of other families, because of the idea of priesthood. Now, I don't understand fully how that plays out, but our standards, maybe socially, are not standards, but what we're used to socially is probably very different than what, let's say, the Mishnah Berurah was dealing with in his time. So the answer, the technical answer in the Gemara for sure is yes. I would tell you to look at the sugya the Shulchan Aruch on the laws of Kiddush and Hilchot Shabbat for a full discussion of that. And you'll see there's some interesting discussion. Happy to talk about more when we get on the Thursday morning class in about 2 or 3 years when we get there. Okay. Now, okay, yeah, so the second line, Hashem echad u'shmo echad. How does this all connect, right? Hashem echad u'shmo echad. God is one, and his name is one. God's name is one. And l'shem u'tiferet v'letila, and it's for the sake of his name. It's the splendor of his name and the praise of his name. It's praise. So what is going on here with this second part? How does it connect to Shamor v'Zachor b'Dibur Echad? What does God's name have to do with it? So let's analyze here a little bit further. And I want to look at this Ramban. That's where we left off last time. I want to look at this Ramban on the pasuk of Zachor et Yom HaShabbat lekodsho. If you take a look at the Ramban, so the Ramban, by the way, Sefaria recently added, just as a side point here, also as a resource, Sefaria recently added a complete English translation to the Ramban. So if you're ever, and in the italicized parts of their English translation, it is really commentary to explain the Ramban. So if you ever want to understand or look into things and the comments of the Ramban, there is certainly a resource, for those of you, if you're not comfortable 100% with the Hebrew, you have here really a wonderful service that was done. The very lengthy comments of the Ramban here on this phrase, you see, I'm just scrolling down. It's a very lengthy piece here about this. I want to skip to this part right here. I'm just going to read a couple snippets from the Ramban. So the Ramban talks about here, he says, Ve'al derech hapshat, amru b'mechilta kan. He says, on a simple level, the sages teach in the Midrash Halacha, called the Mechilta, which tries to really derive halacha from the psukim. So what do our sages say on a simple level? Shehi mitzvah, the mitzvah of Zachor et Yom HaShabbat lekodsho, to remember and to recall the Shabbat day. Shehi mitzvah sheniskor tamid b'chol yom et HaShabbat shelo nishkachuhu. That every day of the week, that really on a pshat level, what it means, Zachor et Yom HaShabbat lekodsho, right? Forget the other drashot of Chazal. That's the source for Kiddush on Friday night, and that's the source for Kiddush on Shabbos morning, even, which is the Rabbanon mitzvah or rabbinic mitzvah. But he says on a pshat level, what does it mean, Zachor Yom HaShabbat lekodsho? And you can never ignore the pshat also. There's something always important in the simple understanding of the text, and that is that every single day there is a mitzvah to mention Shabbat. So that we don't forget Shabbat, the centrality of Shabbat.
I'm doing it in here. I feel like it.
1 second. And that we don't mix up, the Shabbat with other days. That it's not just like another day of the week. And this is every day we have to do this. Because if we always are recalling this every single day, we're mentioning Shabbat every single day, then we will remember Ma'aseh Bereshit, the creation of the world at all times. Every day we'll remember it. And what will we acknowledge also at all times? We will acknowledge that the world has a creator, that there is a God, plain and simple. Shabbat on one level is about testifying to God as creator, God's existence, and God as creator of the world. And Shabbat is an oath. It's supposed to be a sign in the Torah. This is in Parshat Kitisa. Many say this as part of the Shabbat morning Kiddush. We read these psukim, right? Ki othi beinu veinechem. It's a sign between you and me, God, the Jewish people, right? Between you guys and me, right? Shabbat is a sign. What's the sign? V'zeh ikar gadol be'emunat ha'el. This is a really fundamental principle in believing in God, right? When we keep Shabbat, that is testifying to our belief that God created the world. Otherwise, why are we missing out on all the productive activities we could do? We could be making money on Shabbos. How many Jews didn't work on Shabbos and lost their job or didn't get job opportunities because they refused to work on Shabbos? You wouldn't do such a thing unless you really believed that God created the world. Otherwise, if you didn't believe it, then why would we leave the money on the table? So you see, on a simple level, Shabbat the Ramban is pointing out here, equals emunah in God and that's expressed as God created the world. If I didn't believe in God, then I don't then believe in God created the world, then I would be happy to work on Shabbos. If I believe in God, I believe He created Shabbat, then I'm going to refrain on Shabbat from all sorts of things. And so this is what he explains here in terms of a simple way to understand what the rabbis understood on a simple level. How do we mention Shabbat every single day? How did the Livin back in the time?
That's a good hint.
Mention the Shabbat every single day. It's through the right. Good. There was a Shir Shel Yom. We say this today at the end of Shacharit for Nusach Ashkenaz. It's Nusach Sfard. It's not exactly at the end, and I believe probably for those who are davening Adot HaMizrach, I think it's also not exactly at the end of the Tefillah, and that is Shir Shel Yom. What do we say? Hayom Yom Rishon b'Shabbat. Today is the first day, in the week as we're sort of leading to Shabbat, and then so on and so forth throughout the week. Every day we kind of mention Shabbat along the way. It's no coincidence, by the way, that I think that on Wednesday, when in terms of halacha, we turn our attention to the coming Shabbat, we add on a verse at the end of the Shir Shel Yom that is Lechu Niranina, which is the opening to Kabbalat Shabbat. I don't think that's a coincidence that little extra pasuk made its way into the Shir Shel Yom for Wednesday. But the point is that we're kind of looking towards Shabbat. Now, let's take a look here at another little snippet from the Ramban. He says here, quoting from the Gemara in Chulin, that the sages taught us Shabbat shkula keneged kol mitzvot Shabbat Torah. The sages teach us in Masechet Chulin that Shabbat is keneged. It's sort of equal, to all the mitzvot in the Torah, right? Keeping Shabbat is like is equal to everything. Kamo she'amar b'avodah zarah, as it says in Masechet Avodah Zarah, which, by the way, and if you look at Masechet Avodah Zarah, it goes even further. By the way, it says that God, I think he actually quotes this further down. Let's see if I can find it in a very quick manner. I don't know, maybe he doesn't quote it here. But the idea is that in Masechet Avodah Zarah, if you keep Shabbos, but you do all the other sins, you keep Shabbos, so somewhere there's forgiveness for some of the things that you do. That doesn't mean that you can go out and murder and steal and whatever, and say, "Oh, I keep Shabbos, so it's all good." That doesn't work. See the end of the first. See the first chapter of Sefer Yeshayahu for why that doesn't work. He writes here, Ribnei, why is Shabbat so important? Like it's like equals all the other mitzvot. Ribnei Shabbat na'id al kol ikarei ha'emunah, because Shabbat it speaks to, right. We're testifying to the core value of our belief. The chidush, right, in the chidush of the world, that God created the world. Uva hashkacha, that God oversees the world. Uva nevuah, and that prophecy is the real deal, right? That when God transferred all this through Moshe to us, the Torah, right? That's real. That's not, hocus pocus. So that is what Shabbat really means. And so now I think if we go just, utilizing what the Ramban said here, which I think is really helpful. And again, you can feel free to read the rest of the Ramban, in the source sheet on your own time. But when we think about, this idea of Shamor v'Zachor b'Dibur Echad, these are the foundations of Shabbat, the laws of Shabbat, the positive and the negative commandments of Shabbat, the feeling of Shabbat, that there's supposed to be there's a refraining from Malacha, and Zachor, many point out, really reflects the feel of Shabbat, the kavod and the oneg. Now I know those are rabbinic add-ons to the honor and the delighting in Shabbat, but the feel of Shabbat is captured there, and God caused us to hear that. And when we observe that Shabbat that God commanded us, the Shamor and the Zachor, what are we saying to the world? Hashem echad u'shemo echad. That God is one, we believe in God, and his name is one, and his name is how it's manifest in the world, which again, I've pointed out many times, comes through us. God's name is as known as we make it in this world. I know, yes, God could bring down whatever, and he could cause the sea to split and everything. So he could bring his own name. He doesn't need our help. But lema'aseh, practically speaking, God's name is represented through us. And so when we do this, we acknowledge Hashem Echad, and we are proclaiming to the world Shemo Echad, right? The oneness of God's name and how he is manifest and understood in this world. L'shem u'letiferet v'letilan. How are we? What are we doing with his name when we observe Shabbat? We are speaking towards the splendor of God's name, right? And this, and we're praising God's name by doing these things. By observing Shabbat, we are praising God's name. L'shem u'letiferet, right? For the sake of his name, we observe Shabbat. For the splendor of God's name, we observe Shabbat. That it should be a beautiful name, beautiful, that we express our belief in God creating the world. And of course, that is a type of praise. That's probably the highest kind of praise that we can give God, is that we believe in God, and we want the world to understand that we believe in God by refraining from all the things that we are not allowed to do on Shabbat. Again, as I said, even though that we're giving up on tremendous opportunities by not engaging fully on Shabbat with the world. So I think that's what's going on here in the opening stanza. It's really about, and this is a little bit my opinion on this, but I think here we have, right, that if we have these things were commanded to us, and when we observe those commands, we are making God's name, we are declaring the oneness of God and praising and glorifying God's name. Okay. Questions about that opening stanza? Your own thoughts, by the way. I'm happy to it's not I'm not the be all end all and far from it of what's right. I'm curious if anyone has any other thoughts, or if that doesn't make sense and you want a follow-up question there. Okay. If there are no comments, so let's keep going. So then let's take a look at the next stanza. Okay. Likrat Shabbat lechu v'nelcha ki hi mekor haberacha merosh mikedem nisucha sof maasev machashavat tchila. By the way, I'm sorry, there's no translation here. The Sefaria didn't have the translation. I didn't have time to write in the translation. Again, if you open up, if you have a Siddur at home, you want to follow along that way, an art scroll, Koren, you can follow along the translation there, but I'll translate here. But Likrat Shabbat, lechu v'nelcha. Let us go out. Lechu v'nelcha. Let us go out to Likrat Shabbat, to welcome the Shabbat. All right. So again, we have it in the plural here. Let us go out to welcome the Shabbat. Why are we so excited to welcome the Shabbat? Ki hi mikor habaracha, because the Shabbat is the source of all bracha, of all blessing. Merosh mikedem nisucha, right? It was from the beginning. It was designated. From the very outset, from the very beginning, it was designated as such to be this kind of day, a day which is the source of bracha. Sof ma'aseh, it was the last thing essentially that was created, right? And b'machashava tchila, but even though it was created last, like a Shabbat comes at the end of the 7 days of creation, right? But b'machshava, right, when God was planning this all out, it was the first thing God was thinking about, Shabbat, right? Everything is going to lead up to the Shabbat. Okay. By the way, for the folks I see who are in shul, by the way, if you want, you can just just turn the volume down if you don't want, if it's causing noise over there. I don't think anybody's going to be joining tonight, or you can turn it off. It's up to you. Okay.
Rabbi, why do they have on Habracha, why do we have a Hey there?
Let me look. Where are you here? Oh, Mikor Habberacha. Right. So it sounds like it's like a particular, I didn't even think about that, right? It's a particular, is a source of Mikor Habberacha, meaning of, maybe you could say that means of bracha, of goodness, right? Shabbat meaning is the source of good, of bracha, the category of bracha, meaning it's the specific. I don't know. You're saying it's a hey, I should take something more specific than that.
It would be expressed what you're expressing with Kihi Mikor Bracha. It's a source of blessing. But it's the blessing, Habaracha, the Hey Hayidiyah has got to be meaning reflecting back on something.
Well, it also scans better poetically.
To say Habaracha? Wait, Alan, explain why we better poetically.
I don't know, just Keith, I think it flows better to say Habaracha. I think the poetry works better that way.
Because there's probably a certain amount of syllables on each line, or something like that. I didn't count it up, but it could be. Let's explore this though, Bob, and maybe this will help explain. Because how is Shabbat the Mekor HaBaracha? And maybe it is a particular bracha. Let's take a look here. So we saw the Ramban. Let's scroll down further here. Okay, so what's the bracha? See, I told you it's a very long English translation. They added a lot of commentary. Okay, let's keep going. Come. Okay, here we go. Okay, we're back to our sugya in Masechet Shabbat. This is the same sugya where the story about Rabbi Chanina, he goes out to the field, etc. So we have here Amar. Let's learn this Gemara a little bit, and we'll probably have to finish this thought next week fully. Amar Rabbi Shimon ben Pazi, Amar Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi, Mishum Bar Kapara. Okay, you have a whole series. This all comes attributed back to Bar Kapara. Okay, Bar Kapara was a Tana. He lived at the time of the Mishnah. Kol hamakayim shalosh seudot b'Shabbat. If you fulfill and eat 3 meals on Shabbat, which is the mitzvah, so nitzol mishalosh puraniyot. You will be rescued from 3 punishments. Mechevlo shel Mashiach, from the pangs of Mashiach, the suffering that is often talked about in Chazal, but that comes before Mashiach arriving. Don't ask me what exactly the punishment will be, what it looks like. I have no idea. Umidina shel Gehenim, from the judgment of Gehenim. There's no better way of translating this as some sort of equivalent of an unpleasant afterlife place. Okay, Umilchemet Gog uMagog, this end of days war of Gog uMagog. These are the things that you'll be saved from if you have Shalosh Shudas every week, 3 meals. By the way, big incentive to have Shalosh Shudas every week, right? If you just do this, all these things are off the table. Again, by the way, for the folks in shul here, you could just mute or turn the volume all the way down on the iPad there. Okay. He goes through some proofs here. How do you know these things? You can look at it yourself. But the point is, I want to point out here the importance of observing a law on Shabbat. Look what it saves you from, right? Amar Rabbi Yochanan Mishum Rabbi Yossi. Kol ha'me'aneget ha'Shabbat notinu lachla b'li mitzarim. Okay, if you delight in the Shabbat. Here, hold on. We have time over there.
All right, that's good.
Hold on. Here, I'm gonna do this. Anybody here for the davening? Hopefully you're not. Okay, cool. There we go. Okay. Amar Rabbi Yochanan Mishum Rabbi Yossi. Kol ha'ma'aneg Shabbat nodin lo nachla b'li mitzarim. Rabbi Yossi teaches us, anyone who delights in the Shabbat, you really enjoy the Shabbat, you live it to its fullest, you delight in the Shabbat day. You know what the reward is for such a person? The reward is so great. It's that it's like you have an inheritance without any b'li mitzarim, without any of the pain. It's going to be it's a wonderful experience, right? It's a wonderful experience. Again, delighting in Shabbat, and you get so much reward from it. Okay. I believe it's like, sorry, that it's not really just pain. I believe it's without borders, right? So you're going to have a great inheritance. Okay. Again, you can look at some of the different proofs. How do you know that? I just want to show you a few of these Ma'amarei Chazal. What else? And how do you Here, take a look at Rabbi Yehuda Amarav. Kol hama'aneg et Shabbat notnin lo mishalot libo. If you delight in the Shabbat, you get all the things that your heart desires, all the things that you ask for in your heart. This is what happens if you keep Shabbat and you delight in it and you're excited by it. Look at all the bracha you get. Okay? And the pasuk in Yeshayahu says the Karata la Shabbat Oneg, the Shabbat is supposed to be a day that's you call Shabbat day a delight. Bema bameh on go. How do you express your delight on Shabbat? And again, this is something we've seen similar stories to already. So one person said, "Oh, well, how do you have a delight in Shabbat?" Well, you prepare special dishes. The tavshil shel trodin v'dogim gedolim v'rashei shumin. You have all these different things. You know, you have a special dish of beets and big, large pieces of fish, and you have heads of garlic. These were delights and whatnot. So, and Rabbi Chia Barashi, quoting Rab, says, "Afil davar muat." Even if you have a small little thing, that is that's very special, right? V'lichvod Shabbat asaw, and you do it for Shabbat. Harei ze oneg. That's oneg Shabbat. That's delighting in the Shabbat. And how could you do that? Oh, kasa de harsana. It's some sort of fish hash. Fish is an old tradition to have fish on Shabbat, special fish. Goes back to the time of the Gemara. If you do the littlest things for Shabbat to show your appreciation how special Shabbat is, you are going to be blessed with so many good things, apparently, according to tradition. Lastly, here you see Rabbi Yochanan is quoted as saying, "Kol mishamer Shabbat kehilchato." If you observe Shabbat, kedasu kedin, perfectly, afilu oved. This is the piece here. Afilu oved avodah zara, kedor enosh. Even if you worshipped avodah zara, idolatry, like the generation of Enosh, one of the generations if you're going through from Parshat Bereshit. It's in Parshat Bereshit, right? Or Parshat Noach. Maybe it's in Noach. Enosh comes after Noach, right? I'm trying to remember now. They have the quote here of the pasuk. He's in chapter 4. That's in Bereshit. So if there's a generation that was terrible. They were avodah zarah worshippers. Mochal lo. You observe Shabbos, you have mechila. You're forgiven. Even if you worshipped idols, you're forgiven. Mochalin lo. Wow. Okay. So you see here, okay, you see the proof how it's a cute proof how there's no you get mechila. But the point is, it was clear in Chazal's tradition that people who observed Shabbat and observed it the way it's supposed to be, to delight in it, to carefully keep all the halachot, this is going to lead to tremendous amounts of bracha, right? So now let's go back over here. And again, I still don't know how to answer Bob's question perfectly here. He's pointing out very well the hey hayidiyah, that means like that there's a specific bracha that may be referred to here. But likrat Shabbat lechu v'nelcha, that if let's go out and greet the Shabbat because it is the source of the bracha. Maybe by the way, the bracha here, I don't know. I'm just al regel achat, on one leg here answering the question. Maybe the bracha here is the bracha of. Sorry, a fly just flew onto my computer. The bracha that's being referred to here maybe is the bracha of I'm just trying to express it. You see all in those passages in the Gemara, right? That it's like that life is good, right? So maybe the bracha is like this is the key to life, right? This unlocks, it unlocks. I don't know. I'm not sure. I have to think about the question more. But you can clearly see that Chazal had a strong tradition of Shabbat being the makor ha-bracha, the makor bracha, maybe I should say, the source of bracha, because if you actually observe Shabbat properly, it is a day that is associated with bracha, with goodness in our lives. And I think that Chazal, even if you don't take what they say literally there, that if you do this, then even if you worship Avodah Zarah, then it's all good and you're forgiven. But I think what we're seeing from Chazal is that one who takes this day seriously is, again, testifying to the oneness of God and that God is the creator. And that's why you can forgive Avodah Zarah, because if somebody worshipped Avodah Zarah, you'll say, well, but at least they know that God really created the world. They're making some mistake over there with the Avodah Zarah. Maybe they think it's some intermediary to God, but they understand it at its core that God created the world. God is in charge, right? Because, again, why would you keep Shabbat if you don't believe? You're missing so many things. How many things do we give up to keep Shabbat? Again, not just, aside from the financial aspect that we give up, there are other things we're giving up when we observe Shabbat. So I think that this is how to explain, one way to explain ki hi mekor habaracha. Now, the second part here, Merosh mikedem nisucha. This was the designated at the outset from the very beginning, right? And it's kind of connects to the idea that sof ma'aseh machashavat chila, that yes, Shabbat didn't exist. The week doesn't start with Shabbat, right? God didn't start by resting at first. He rests at the end. And this was always the plan. Sof ma'aseh, true that the last thing in the 7 days was the resting. God didn't rest on Wednesday. He could have rested on Wednesday, by the way, taken a break in the middle and finished the work. He rather rested after all the work was done. But this was always the goal, machashavat chila. And this speaks to an attitude that maybe we ought to have, because if God did it that way, right, that was ultimately a plan, God was going to rest. God could have made a 6-day week, by the way, and said, I finished it, and now let's go back to Sunday. God created the Shabbat, and that was always the plan from the beginning, right? But it was the machshavat chila, that was really what was the intention, right? That we work hard in life, we earn our parnasah, we do what we need to do during the 6 days of the week. And then on the 7th day, we are supposed to rest from that. We are supposed to reconnect with the idea, David, that God is the creator, right? That is again the essence of why we have Shabbat, to testify that God created the world, and this is always built into the system to help us maybe be spiritually connected, right? That we always, going back to what the Ramban quoted from the Midrash. Right, you have to mention Shabbat every day, because really that's the moment, that's the part that keeps us really connected to God. Because even if we don't think about it, my friends, that moment when we keep Shabbat speaks a lot to our belief. Right? I grew up that way, that's why I do it. I'm telling you, if you keep Shabbat somewhere deep down in the kishkas, that means something, right? That really there's a connection between ourselves and God, that we really deep down, even if we're not thinking about it, it's there. Edna, go ahead. Yeah.
Thank you. I was just thinking that there are stories about how when you buy something and you earmark it for Shabbat, that's lauded. You have food for Shabbat, it's lauded. Clothing for Shabbat, it's lauded. But even in the legal document known as the ketubah, mentioned.
That's right. That's right. Everything is, we view everything from the perspective of how far are we till Shabbat. Right? The Chamishi b'Shabbat, the Shishi b'Shabbat. Right? You could have just said B'Yom Chamishi, Chaf Hei b'Adar. You don't have to say b'Shabbat. Everyone understands what Yom Chamishi means. Everyone understands what Yom Shlishi means. But we say b'Shishi b'Shabbat or b'Chamishi b'Shabbat. Right? That's how we express ourselves. That's how we express ourselves even in the ketubah. Very good, excellent point.
See, Rabbi, but it's not. You kept stressing what we have to give up for Shabbat, but Shabbat is its own reward, and aside from Yom Menucha, it's different. It's not. It doesn't have to be seen as a restricted day.
Absolutely, it's not. And those passages that we just read in Masechet Shabbat, right? Shalosh Sudot. That's an opportunity. right? Then there are other mitzvot that we mentioned of oneg Shabbat. Those are things that how you treat the day, and those are that brings about bracha in our life.